All right, can you guys hear me okay on the microphone? All right, well, thank you, Jill, for that. I appreciate it. My name is Keely Weyker. I'm the Director of Engagement and Outreach at the Everglades Foundation. I've been there almost 9 years at this point. It's been a wonderful experience, especially as we've seen so much progress for Everglades restoration in this past decade, and I'll go over some of that. I always like to start off with a map to show you how massive this ecosystem is. And as you can see, the Everglades starts up in Shingle Creek in Orlando. So if you've ever been to the Orlando airport or the convention center, that's actually where the Everglades starts. There's so many screens, I don't know what to put. I'm a screen pointer. But really what this map is showing is what the historic Everglades used to be. So we used to have unrestricted flow, basically from the Kissimmee Chain of Lakes down to Lake Okeechobee, and it would basically flow over that rim. Today, and how we're living in it currently, is through a system that's been canal dredged and really directing that water for flood control, so we can live here in Florida. And so this system is half of its original size, so you can see we're working with half the real estate here to clean and send that same amount of water, and so that's where Everglades restoration comes in. Now, this is your first taste of maps and graphs and things like that, so I like to shake up the presentation a little bit with some photos of my time out in the Everglades. So I tease you a little bit with the pretty, but the Everglades is very unique. We have so many different ecosystems. We have over 2,000 plants and animal species. About 70 or so are threatened and endangered species. So it's a very unique ecosystem with big cypress. We have sawgrass. This is that grass. If you go the wrong way, you find out it cuts you. And we think about people coming down here and exploring and living here, living amongst the grasses and these different habitats. And what also lives here are a diverse group of birds and waterfowl and wading birds. So I realized as I was going through my photos last night that I have way too many bird pictures. So I apologize, they're majority bird pictures. But right here we have a red-shouldered hawk. This is more of our blondish, subspecies of this bird, and it's special here in Florida that we have this blonder red-shouldered hawk. We have alligators here. We also have crocodiles. We're the only place in the world that has both alligators and crocodiles, which is, what a cool thing. I mean, some people might not find that to be very cool. I find it to be really exciting. We have anhingas. We have all these wading birds and water birds that fish and feed on the different animals that live here. And they're all key species. This is my Harry Potter hawk I took up in Kissimmee. He's got that lightning bolt on his forehead. I think that's so cool. But this is in Kissimmee, so this is north of Lake Okeechobee, and one of those oak hammocks. This is a, let me look, swallow-tailed kite. This was taken on the western side of Lake Okeechobee in a wildlife preserve over there. This here is our loggerhead shrike, and so this was taken at Jonathan Dickinson State Park. This is a different landscape that's sandy. It's more of that pine rockland type of habitat, and so this one is, you're hiking through 7 miles of sand to find this bird, whereas before I showed you big cypress where you're hiking through 7 miles of water to see that. And so it's a beautiful place, not the most inviting place, as I've just explained. You're hiking through some rough places, but it's really special in the fact that it's very water-based, and that's a lot of the conversation today is about the water. This osprey and this, the bittern, I had to Google his name last night. This is taken at our flow equalization basin. So this is one of our areas that's holding and cleaning and sending that water south. And so the wildlife has fully immersed itself into these areas. And so not only is it cleaning that water, storing it, but it's also a place where you can go birding and you can bike around here and explore these different areas. I also go fishing in here. So if you're a big fisherman, fisherwoman, caught some of my best bass in this area. So if you're into that. These are our gallinules. So we have our purple and our common. And so all of these animals live amongst the grasses. They're able to walk across them, feed on the different prey in the area. And so when you're out here, you don't realize that when these birds are walking through the grasses, there's a half a foot of water underneath them as well. And so they've all adapted in these special ways to live amongst this ecosystem. And we have prairies. We have, and this is taken in Everglades National Park, we have these prairies with blooms and flowers, and we think about, is there seasons in Florida? Well, we have a wet and a dry season, but we also have times where the mealy grass in the park is purple. It's beautiful. And so we do have slight seasons here where different ecosystems are changing. This is a woodpecker taken in the national park as well. And so I show you these just to, before I get into the maps and the graphs and charts, that you can really get an idea of how beautiful this ecosystem is and what lives there. And I promise there's more than alligators and birds. I need to get out more and diversify my photos, but here we go, bugs. Probably not our favorite, but they're a key part of that ecosystem when you think about what are these birds feeding on? What are the fish eating? What's pollinating the flowers in these different areas? And so it all works together. And then we have us. So how do we fit into this picture? And so that speaks to how are we restoring this ecosystem and protecting our drinking water supply here in at least South Florida. We know that parts of South Palm Beach County, Broward County, and Monroe County, Miami-Dade County all rely on the Everglades and the Biscayne Aquifer for their drinking water supply. So when you go home tonight, you turn on that tap, that's water from the Everglades. And so that's a really important part of it and why we were founded. So we were founded about 32 years ago in 1993, right in the bay behind us here, with 2 fishing guides. And they realized that when they were out there fishing that there was seagrass die-off, there wasn't as many fish, the water wasn't clear. What's going on? Why are we seeing this? And they recognized that the problem wasn't the bay, it was the whole system. And how do we fix that system? And so they started the Everglades Foundation really on the basis of science. How can we figure out what's going on through here, or in here in the Everglades through science, and take that and bring it to the advocacy? How do we get these projects built, funded, and done? And then, listen, we have science, we have advocacy. What about the next generation? The next people who are going to the polling box and making their votes or running, for certain positions, decision-making positions, or future scientists or advocacy folks. So how do we educate them? And I'll touch briefly here on our education program. We started our education program about 10 years ago. It's a state-aligned program, so our programming goes towards the teachers' credit days, and we give them everything they need. So we come to the school, we do the teacher training, and we give them everything they need, whether it's Play-Doh, hula hoops. I see that our education team packing the best stuff. I always steal the stuffies for my toddler. I'm like, oh, a new one. But these are things that we're ensuring that our programming and Everglades education is in 32 different counties across the state. They're reading that. Right now, it's like a sentence in a textbook in 5th grade. So we're really not seeing it. And we recognize this when we asked a local kid, tell us about the animals in your backyard. And they can tell us about maybe a panda bear or a ring-tailed lemur, but they can't tell us about a Florida panther or a manatee. And so it's really educating the kids that are our future citizens here, and they're making those decisions and choosing to live here, what is important and how we can preserve that. And so we've reached quite a few students through this program. We have a champion school program where the schools basically incorporate Everglades into their everyday life. How do they bring it into all lessons, whether that's educating the cafeteria crew to the principal and bringing them all in around the Everglades. So this program is near and dear to my heart. I wish I was a part of it. They do fun stuff. But yeah, it's a really great program. And so I'm going to take a step back to how we got here, where we're at. And so we've just celebrated our 25th anniversary last year of the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. And what this plan entails is basically a comprehensive look at 68 different projects across the state. So I mentioned the Everglades starts in Orlando. These projects span throughout the state, all the way through down to Everglades National Park. And so what that bill really did was it locked in a 30-year plan and a 50-50 cost share. So that means the federal government and the state government both have to put in equal amounts to fund these projects. I think at the time it was $8 billion. Mind you, that was a long time ago, and it's no longer just that $8 billion number. It's definitely increased. But it is a plan in place where we have commitment, both federal and state, and that's extremely rare. It's the largest ecosystem restoration project in the world. And so what we're doing here is really being the example of how you can do this for an ecosystem this large, but we're learning from it as well. And so what that also means is that we've seen investment in it. And in recent years, and I'll get into why, but why is there such an increase in investment? Well, this is our drinking water supply. People come here to tour, to visit and recreate and live within the ecosystem. And so they recognize that if we don't get these projects done, we're not going to have a future here in Florida. We need to preserve that. And so there's a lot of support on the federal level, not just from Florida representatives, but also across the board when it comes to appropriations and things like that. They tend to vacation here or have a second home here, and they want to ensure that they can continue to do that. And it's also through the work of our organization and other organizations, and the business community, the realtor community, the Chamber of Commerce community, of coming to the table and saying, this is all important to us. Even the dive community comes to the table. They need that clean water from the bay to benefit those reefs. And so we've seen an increase in funding from the federal and state level. And what that means is we're getting projects done sooner, and we've had that momentum to keep them moving. So this is just a quick chart showing that information there. And like I said, it's our water supply. So we're investing in the future of our lives here in Florida. And so when I talk about the Biscayne Aquifer, it's the Everglades is recharging that aquifer, and then we use it in our day-to-day life. So whether that's turning your tap on, filling the pool, making coffee, washing the car, all in all, we are utilizing the Everglades in all shape and form. And so the other thing is the recreational component, the uses of the Everglades. So I know we talked a lot about diving here, but I'm sure you use the Everglades in other ways. And so we created this map of uses. I think it has a Nat Geo inspiration behind it. Our science team really worked hard on it, but showing all of the different uses. Camping down in Flamingo in Everglades National Park, showing our wading birds. We're fishing. Let's see, we're doing kayaking. Well, jet skiers, we all have opinions about them, but I'll cover that part up. I know where I am. But there's all these different uses of the ecosystem. And these all tie into the value of this ecosystem to us. I mentioned, again, drinking water, but the overall asset of the Everglades. How is this of value to us? And then I'd love to learn how you guys utilize the Everglades. So if you're interested, scan the QR code and we can see the words pop up here. But how do you use the Everglades? Are you birding? Are you hiking? Do you drink water? How are we using the Everglades? And so this is some of what our chief economist took into thought as he thought about how do we value this ecosystem, the greater Everglades. How is it of importance to us? Oh, there we go. Perfect. Photography, hiking, birding. I can be supportive of all of those. Snorkel. Thank you for putting drink water. Yep, kayaking.
Where's fishing?
Yeah, where's our fisherman in here? Yeah.
We still have camps out on the
The floating cheekies or the raised? Yep. They still do in the 10,000 Islands area. Yeah, so appreciate nature, getting away from all the craziness. Birding, yep. I'll put fishing in there. I'm a big angler. So yeah, as you can see, we thought about these things as we looked at, okay, what is the value of this ecosystem to us, the people that live here, visit here, and what is the value of it? And so recently in June, we held a DC, or an America's Everglades Summit in DC. And our chief economist basically showcased this study that has just come out, finding that the Everglades is a $1 trillion asset to us living here in Florida. So the state of Florida, it's a $1 trillion asset. We like to, our house has value, our car has value. Well, the Everglades has value too. And, we've all heard the number 4-to-1 investment. So every dollar we invest in Everglades restoration, we get $4 in return. And so that's not the common case across most of these projects. So it's something to be proud of, and that we have this asset here in Florida. And some of the other things they found were the value of real estate. I mean, I know here in the Keys, it's proximity. Either you're on the water or you're very close. There's not really an in-between. I live in Broward County, so we can be a little bit far away from the water. But, it's real estate, being near the water, being on the water, that adds to the value of it. Recreation, so going airboating, going boating, kayaking, birding, these are all components of that $8.5 billion finding. And then also carbon sequestration. We know these wetlands are sequestering some of that carbon from the atmosphere, and they're trapping it there. So we have immense amounts of mangroves and wetlands that are absorbing that carbon. So that's an additional asset that they found in this study. And to put it simply, without all the numbers, quality of life, we live here due to the quality of life, the goods produced, I'm going to say it again, drinking water, and our infrastructure. So we have this natural infrastructure in our mangrove forest. We know that the reefs also provide benefit during storm surge or storm events. We have our wetlands that absorb that water. So if we have crazy rain events, they absorb some of that water, and they prevent it from flooding our places that we actually live in. So to be able to have that natural infrastructure is also a part of that goods and services. So I say all this to get to the projects. So what are these projects I've talked about? 68 different projects across the state. What are these? And so one of them being the Kissimmee River Restoration Project. This actually predates the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. This is a project to basically remeander this river. So they took 24-ish miles of canaled river that went straight into the lake. No flood control, no cleaning, it just went straight into the lake. And they remeandered it to 40 miles. So they doubled it almost in size. And this project is one of my favorites in the sense that, again, let's remeander a river. It helps with flood control. When you remeander a river, you slow it down. It's not rushing down a canal. And in addition to that, look at the amount of habitat you've just brought back. You have all of these weirs and different lower level water areas that are sawgrass areas, different aquatic plants can come back, and you have a slower flow that's cleaning the water. When this project came online a couple years ago and it was completed, the birds came back immediately, the fish came back immediately, and they saw a huge increase in wildlife coming back to this area. And that photo of my Harry Potter hawk was taken near this project. And so just to see that type of wildlife in that area is really special.
When was the canal made?
The canal was made, I believe, in the 70s and 80s. They realized very quickly that was a bad decision. So during Hurricane Ian, this project was completed, and they actually saw it helped with the slow of flow from that immense amount of water that came from that storm. So you're always going to have some of those impacts, but this definitely helped during that time. And so another project, again, not under that SERP umbrella, but it falls within the where water goes, when it goes type of thing. So even changing the operations of the lake can help with some of those benefits. So equitable operation. So we say that is in one area of the ecosystem is not getting the most benefits, we're all equally getting those benefits. And so this was a process that occurred about 3 or 4 years ago to relook at how are we moving water out of the lake? Where are we sending it? When are we sending it? And by being at the table during that process, our organization and other organizations were able to work with the Corps of Engineers to basically reestablish where that water goes, when it goes there. And by doing that, we were able to increase the amount of water sent south when it's needed and decrease. So as you saw on that map in the beginning, there was these huge discharges when the lake is high. So on that map at the very beginning, when that happens, we see seagrass die-offs, we see blue-green algae blooms, we see fish kills. And so if you can decrease that by 60 and 70% by just changing how a lake is operated, massive impact. No infrastructure needed there. That really helps. Okay. Another project nearby to here is Picayune Strand Restoration Project. And so this project was a failed housing development that they had basically started selling in the 60s. And before that, it was logging. So it was all this cleared land, about, let me double check my number here, 55,000 acres of land that was proposed for like a southern Golden Gate Estates, basically, if you're familiar with the area. Well, you bought the land and you realized half the year it's underwater. That's not really helpful when you're trying to build a house. And so, they realized that, okay, we can't build here. This is not useful. And so the state started to buy back that land, and now we have the Picayune Strand Restoration Project. This, mind you, they started buying in the 80s and 90s. And so this was a really long project, and so I was just at the ribbon cutting back in January. So think about timeline there. They had one of the old volunteers there who had made the phone calls. And it was what an honor to be there and to meet this person that had to sit on the phone and call these people. There was no Google. To call these folks and say, hey, will you sell your land? We're doing a restoration project. And so basically what this project does is it now hydrates this area, and then that water goes out to the 10,000 islands. And so that is rehydrating and also pushing back on some of that saltwater intrusion and the sea level rise that's occurring in that area. So this project is really beneficial to that area and that region. And then you can see here I know it's in the corner here, but the hydration map. So you can see the amount of water that's increasing, that's headed out. And this was 2-3 years ago. So now that the project's online, some of these pump stations are online, we're going to continue to see an increase in hydration in this area. All right, so our crown jewel project. So this project is the EAA Reservoir. This project is the size of the island of Manhattan. So just to put in perspective, this is a 17,000 acre reservoir. And what it's going to do is hold about 240,000 acre feet of water. And the key part of it is that it's going to take lake water, hold it, clean it through an STA, and then send it south through the series of stormwater treatment areas. So when I say STA, I mean stormwater treatment area. And the flow equalization basin here, I mentioned that osprey in the beginning. That was taken in that flow equalization basin. So these are wetlands areas, and these are holding that water and cleaning it, sending it south. Yesterday, we just got an announcement from the Trump administration that they're investing $2 billion in this project to get it done early. So they're getting it done in 2029. We have the money to complete it. This project will provide immense benefits, not only to the estuaries in Fort Myers, St. Lucie, or in St. Lucie Stewart area, and then also Fort Myers, Caloosahatchee area. But a huge beneficiary of this project is Florida Bay. So if we're able to send more of that water south, we're keeping the water conservation areas hydrated. We're keeping Everglades National Park hydrated. And ultimately, that fresh water is getting down to Florida Bay. We're having a less salty bay. And that's hugely beneficial to the wildlife that lives there. But I don't know if you've recognized, there's bridges here. There's not anywhere blocking the water. So the water coming out of the bay is flowing to the coral reefs. And when you have less salty water coming to those reefs, it is providing a healthier habitat for those reefs as well. There's no walls around water. It tends to go where it wants to go at. Thus all these reservoirs. And so part of that flow from the EAA reservoir is these Tamiami Trail bridges. If you've ever had the opportunity to drive Tamiami Trail, this is 3.5 miles of bridging across there. Before that, it was a road, and for 100 years, no water reached the national park due to this road, blocking it from the water conservation areas north. And so I love this project because it's so simple. It's like, well, let's lift the road, you know? We need to get water there, let's lift the road. And so I say that not recognizing that it took a very, very long time, a lot of people's time and effort to get this project across the line. And it was a huge win to get the funding and the project built. They're still in the process of removing the old Tamiami Trail road bed, and then in addition to that, adding some additional culverts. But 3.5 miles of this bridging has now reconnected the system, and that's why we've seen increased waters into Everglades National Park. And a few summers ago, we had a really, really hot weather, and so in the bay, in the past, we saw impacts of seagrass. When it's really hot in the summertime, the bay can't fight off that heat. Well, because of these bridges being online, because of the increased water flow to the bay was more resilient. We were getting more fresh water down there, and so we were seeing benefits, you know, right away from this project being online. And so this is one of those that's like, all right, let's build some bridges. This is a very simple way of moving that water and rethinking about the movement of it. And so the finish line, today we are standing in that finish line, the bay behind, I hope I'm saying that right, the bay is behind us, right? It'd be really embarrassing if I got this far and I've been telling you the wrong direction, but the finish line, so really it is getting the water from Lake Okeechobee, from the chain of lakes in Kissimmee, and then through the water conservation areas to the national park that ultimately flows down to us here in Florida Bay. There you guys are on the map. And so there are additional projects that are in the process of being worked on. We have one in Miami-Dade called the Biscayne Bay Ecosystem or Everglades Ecosystem Restoration Project, or short BBCR. We love our acronyms in the Everglades world, but that's a project that's also going to get the C-111 spreader set in that canal reconnected and help with that sheet flow. So we're still seeing some of those projects in the process of being evaluated, planned, and then in addition to that, getting authorized. And so when those projects are coming online, we're going to see continued benefits from them. I didn't want to go over all 68. I didn't think you guys wanted to dive into that at 7 o'clock at night. But let me see. Oh, I just want to end on some more of my bird photos, but really showcasing the beauty of this system. So even though those reservoirs are, you know, concrete and there's water, and there's still beauty around them. And the fact that the wildlife is coming to them, we're seeing that, you know, they're going to make them beautiful. We're using different wetlands and aquatic plants to clean the water. So ultimately, at the end, they might start off concrete and with bulldozers, things like that, but they'll end up looking like this. And it's a really beautiful way to clean our water and to get it to the right places. And so this is just a sunset photo of the Everglades. Very special place. All right. I hope I didn't talk too fast. I tend to do that. But Also, if you want to learn more about what we're doing, but happy to take questions. Sure. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Anywhere. Yeah, so a great presentation. Thank you very much. So the Tamiamo Trail Project's impressive. I've driven over the years and you see the progress. It's amazing. How come 75 is not an issue? You never hear talk about redoing that.
Yeah, so if you've ever driven, when you drive 75, there's all those little bridges, culverts. So they thought about the movement of water when they built that project. Do you need me to repeat the question in Zoom?
No, you're all good.
Okay, perfect. All right. I just want to double check. So that was a thought during the I-75 project. So there's plenty of water moving under that project or that road at this time. Yep. I thought about that too when I first started. I was like, wait a second.
Of the area, it looks like, of your territory and region, how much has public access? I know, there's a lot, but it seems like some of it is just so remote, which is a good thing,
Yeah.
that it can stay kind of preserved as is. But of the geographical area, how much is available and how much is just nature?
Yeah, so part of the Corps' requirements when they build these projects is you have to have a recreational component. So we've actually seen an increase in recreational access. So every time a reservoir or stormwater treatment area project comes online, they have to open it up for birding, biking, fishing, you name it. And so I believe it's increased by 30% for access or areas to access through these restoration projects. So I always try to pitch it like, you're gonna get a new hiking spot, like this is a good thing. And so for bass fishermen, that's also a bonus. This is a place you can drop a kayak in or a canoe and really have a great day out of it. So yeah, increase of access. They seem remote, but some of these reservoirs are 20 minutes from Fort Myers or 30 minutes from Stewart. The EAA is about 45 minutes from where I live in Broward County. So it seems vast, but definitely easy access. Yep. He's getting his steps in.
So what are the most important pieces of proposed legislature that we need to be aware of and to talk with our representatives about?
Yeah, so I would say on a federal level, it's mainly for us, it's supporting the funding for these projects, so appropriations. So every year they create their budget. So ensuring that your local rep understands, the importance that this is, the ecosystem is to you, and please fund it. Full funding for the Everglades. Yeah. All right. Yep. Jody's going to put me on the spot.
The one slide where you had with the river that you restored to be very windy. Could you go into that a little bit more, why that is a better system than that straight flow that we created?
Yeah. So the meandering river, if you got more, you've doubled the size. So you've doubled the habitat. Without a canal, without the canal, like the flood, basically structures of a canal, you can now have overflow. So you have a flood plain. So during high water events, that river allows the river to expand. You have weirs and more grasses and different aquatic plants that are cleaning that water, whereas you might not have had that in the canal because it's 8 feet deep versus the river being more shallow. And so that allows the photosynthesis and the water to penetrate that water and really creating more of those beneficial oxygen levels and all that. So you slow, during high water events, slow the water going into the lake, cleaning it, and then additionally you have more expanded territory for that water. Does that answer?
But you want that slower flow
Yes.
versus the fast.
In that region, yeah, you want to, and I say slow the flow, that's during like a hurricane event when the water gets to that point. On a day-to-day basis, it's just meandering. I don't have a better way explaining it, meandering that water down to the lake. And it's cleaning, the biggest thing is it's cleaning that water through that system.
So some of the marine biologists I've been talking to are concerned about the quality of the water around the mangroves and the loss of the fish that use it as a nursery. Do you think this project up there is going to help address the problem down here?
Do you mind repeating that question?
Yeah, some of the marine biologists I talk to are concerned about the quality of the water in the mangroves down here,
Okay.
which is affecting its being a good nursery for the fish that depend on it. Do you see your project up there as helping improve the water quality of the mangroves down here?
In local here in Key Largo?
Yeah, and down through the,
Yeah, I mean, I think that is, I will say yes on the front end. I think a lot of the water quality issue, maybe local here, could be runoff and things like that. Now, the water, I can speak to the water that goes into the national park has to meet a certain criteria. It has to meet a certain water quality before it can enter the park. And so that water coming through the park, that's a national park. There's nothing impacting that water at that point as far as quality. There's no runoff or anything like that. And so when it is coming through that in Florida Bay, it's clean. And so how it affects the water here locally, I think probably needs to be looked into. So I don't want to give you a exact answer. I think there's a lot of different players playing into that. That would be outside of that project.
I have a couple of virtual questions
Sure.
from our virtual audience. From Yuku's on YouTube, the restoration law ends in 2023. What comes then?
The restoration law,
Yes.
I don't know. If they could clarify
We
that
can
question.
Circle back to that. There's another one. Melissa Meadows, 3081. Were there any projects that had originally received a lot of public support for and that eventually came to fruition?
A lot of public support for.
Yes.
So I would say the Kissimmee River restoration is one of those, the Tamiami Trail bridging, and then I would say the EAA reservoir has gotten probably the most press and support, local press, or local support because of the broad impacts it has. So not only is it, Kissimmee River was local, that was to the lake and to that area, but that EAA reservoir where it sits, as far as taking the lake water, it's benefiting 8 different counties. That's providing not only the benefits, but also there's not going to be those blue-green algae blooms that are sending whale sharks onto the beach in Naples and Sanibel. You're not going to have that algae going to Stewart where it's impacting boating, things like that, and you get a tickle in your throat when you're around that algae. So those areas are benefited, and then Florida Bay here in the Keys, we're having a healthier bay from it. So really the broad reach of that project has had the most impact, and then we've seen so much support for it. I mean, listen, that announcement yesterday for that investment and to basically move that timeline up 6 years is amazing, and so I think that shows that that's a clear example of support for that project.
My question is about the mammal population. We've talked about alligators and we've talked
My
about
favorite,
birds.
are you going to bring up one of
But
the...
the manatees,
Yeah.
the bears, the panther habitats, I would think that they now have a better freshwater supply. Have you noticed, or does anybody kind of survey that to see how it's ebbing and flowing as well?
I would say there's probably better groups to answer that question as far as, benefits to them. I think, we're bringing these projects online, and there's also, and we talked about it, a lot of development pressure in their habitat as well. So as much as you can bring clean, fresh water to them and regulated water, so, predictable water in the sense they're not too high, not too low, if they don't have the habitat to inhabit, that's going to have a greater impact on them. So I know there's a lot of groups, so if you need suggestions that can speak on the mammals and the wildlife, they can better speak to that population, especially with development pressure across the state.
I have a couple more virtual questions. We have some students from UF watching, which is really exciting.
Nice, welcome.
So in regards to the restoration project in 2023, where did that go? 1 second. Is there a proposal for a follow-up law or additional restoration going on top of that?
I don't know, the problem is I don't know what law they're talking about.
There is mention of a restoration project in 2023.
Okay.
Um,
I would say UF student, if you want to email me, we can chat. I would love to have more context on that.
And additionally, we have a couple more questions. Oh, 2030, not 2023.
Oh, okay.
2030, yes.
So
The
the
CERP,
SERP.
CERP, yes.
Yeah, okay. So I mentioned at the beginning, SERP being completed by 2030. I think we all have, think about when you're redoing your house or something, you're redoing your kitchen. I'd love to have it done in a year. Well, things come up, we got to move things around, plans need to be redesigned. So I think that date was 2030 was a goal. It would be great if it was done by then. We're seeing some of these projects getting done before then, but there are going to be some projects that are completed after that 2030 line. It doesn't affect the legislation, just means that we're not finishing on time. So we missed the due date, basically, but not going to affect any of the funding.
And one additional virtual question. Do you have any idea how these new projects will benefit Florida when it comes to stormwater from hurricanes or any other storms?
Yeah, so these projects, as I mentioned, we're increasing the amount of wetlands, water storage areas. So that's taking a lot of that rainwater that's coming out. I mentioned the Kissimmee River during Hurricane Ian. It's helping mitigate that rush of water into the lake and the communities in that area. So these projects, we actually have some economic data, I believe, in the report that talk about the benefits as it means for impacts from hurricanes, high water events, rain events. And so the more storage we have, the better we're able to handle that. And I'll flip it on the other side. We're in a drought right now, or we've been experiencing low water. If we had, for example, the EAA online, if these reservoirs we've completed were fully online, we would have stored, we would have planned for that. We just don't have anywhere to hold that water at the moment. So we are going through a drought right now, but if we had some of those online, we would have been able to hold some of that water, shift it around, and be able to help prevent some of the fires and things we've been experiencing through this drought. Okay. Okay.
Is there testing or research going on right now in regards to the Biscayne Aquifer and how healthy it is and how saltwater intrusion is affecting it? I know we used to have freshwater springs down here in the Keys, so I attribute that a lot to the Biscayne Aquifer, the lack of freshwater in it, and I'm just wondering if there is a project or research on that right now.
I believe, they always have to test the wells. So we have the well fields, they have the wells pulling from them. So they're always constantly testing, this well, I know in Hollywood and Broward County, we lost that well because of saltwater intrusion. So they're constantly looking at that. As far as a broader research of that, I mean, a lot of our resiliency scientists are looking at, okay, if we have increased recharge of the aquifer through these restoration projects, how will that push on the freshwater in the aquifer and keep that salt water out? And so I believe that research is underway, but it's really one of those things where we have to see the projects come online, they have to do the modeling to see how that will affect the aquifer. But they're constantly looking at the well fields as far as it relates to saltwater intrusion, things like that. They can't send us salty water. We wouldn't be happy customers, so they got to keep an eye on that. All right. I'll turn off mine, and I think then you can use.
Well, I have a question, which is, so first of all, thank you for this wonderful presentation. Learned a lot. My family was visiting from Virginia, and we took them to both Everglades National Park and to Biscayne